Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Well, I can't see you, but thank you for tuning in today for our last Create Space webinar for the year, showcasing success, how to succeed in LGBTQ plus marketing. Just want to start by acknowledging country.
Advertising Council Australia would like to begin by acknowledging and paying our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast today. ACA would also like to acknowledge their culture of storytelling through art, dance and music, and we pay respect to the elders past, present and future on other lands throughout all communities who might be participating today.
And I'm very proud to be on Gadigal land today, and hope that you are all tuning in around the country to hear about the best practice of inclusive marketing and how to excel in LGBTQ plus marketing as we start to think about Pride season and Mardi Gras in Australia. This session will be recorded and available on our website. I'm Hannah Sturrock. I'm National Head of Engagement at ACA and DE&I lead. And before we do get started with the content today, I just wanted to set the scene a little bit, provide a bit of background. As many of you know, Advertising Council Australia is the peak body for the leading agencies in the advertising industry. Our purpose is to foster the long-term prosperity of the industry and make advertising the most valued professional service in Australia. And this is a lofty vision, but we tackle it through multiple programs. Our accreditation program, which recognises agencies that achieve a set of standards that demonstrate strong people governance and a commitment to raising the ethical and professional standards in the industry. Our people pillar, which includes ad school, award school, and IPA education. Award School 2025 is coming around pretty quick. We have an info night in February online, so anyone can join. Award School is a national 12-week program that teaches people how to strategically and creatively solve marketing challenges. Champion Creativity is another of our key pillars. The awards are opening soon, and This Way Up Creative Festival will return in August to Sydney. We're also the local reps in Australia for the Cannes Lions, and we will be running the Cannes Young Lions competition around the country, which will also be opening soon. We also have a media partnership called The Growth Agenda every Monday in The Australian, which is dedicated to the topic of commercial creativity. And third, the Demonstrate Value, where we have effectiveness conversations that prove the positive impact of advertising and marketing on business growth and society. The Effie Awards, the pinnacle of that program, and they will open in February. And if you are joining us from Melbourne today, there are still some tickets available for the Effie's Work Behind the Work event next week. Advert Council also delivers programs like Create Space, which is our DE&I initiative designed to build an industry where everyone can enter and thrive. If you haven't done already, please do download the latest report, watch the launch webinar to sort of understand where we're at and any themes that are coming through the data. And check out the wealth of tools, templates, and training in the Create Space hub on our website. The Create Space census uses Kantar's Inclusion Index to track feelings of belonging at work. And based on the most recent census, which ran at the end of 2023, our overall industry inclusion index score is 56, which is 6 points lower than it was in 2021, and in line with the Australian norm at 55. Kantar's research also charts a global trend of declining inclusion index scores, with 8 out of 12 markets decreasing between 2019 and 2022. Now, who is feeling the drop in inclusion? When we cut that data by various demographic groups, we saw really big drops between 2021 and 2023 for LGBTQ plus people. Their score dropped 10% in that 2 years. Asian respondents and people with physical disability. All of these groups are registering lower feelings of belonging and higher levels of discrimination and negative behavior at work. Now, that is a little disappointing, of course, but this is about a project which really does demand persistence and patience. Achieving progress in 2 years is not easy, despite what it might look like from the outside. And we have definitely made a lot of progress in patches, but this is more of a long-term brand value category, not the short-term effects category, if I can sort of use a marketing metaphor there. And there is just no room for DE&I fatigue. So to really create space for everyone, we must take an action and another one, and then another one. And every single one of us can make an impact. Lots of small daily actions that people can see and feel are really key. And the Create Space Hub is full of ideas and resources to help you start your journey. So now that you've got that context, I'd like to introduce today's presenters from They Connect. Hank, rom-com reader, inclusion nerd, and a lover of fried potatoes. Hank has held multiple roles as an LGBTQIA+ advocate, social entrepreneur, writer, podcaster, and public speaker. And Polly, live music queen, strategic marketer, cat parent, surprisingly outdoorsy for her pale complexion. Polly has navigated the corporate marketing world for the last 15 years, working with some of the largest brands in Australia. Welcome, Hank and Polly.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
And I'm going to sort of leave you to it. But would just like to say that we do have time for questions today. And Hank and Polly would love everyone tuning in today to put them into the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation. And we will definitely make time to answer them at the end of the prezzo. So let's get started. Over to you, Hank and Polly.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We are delighted to be here today. Truly, this is a topic that we could talk about for a very long time, but we're really excited to showcase some positivity around what's happening with brands excelling in their LGBTQ plus inclusive marketing. Now, to kick us off, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Darkinjung people. So they're the traditional custodians of land from where I'm presenting. Hank is coming to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And to the elders of this land, past, present, and future, we extend our gratitude and our acknowledgement. Sovereignty was never ceded.
And it's also really poignant that today is actually the last day of Trans Awareness Week, which is a week-long, I guess, celebration and commemoration of trans, gender diverse, and non-binary people that is recognized all around the world. And so we wrap up Trans Awareness Week today, and then tomorrow we spend the day Trans Day of Remembrance, where we remember our trans and gender diverse people that we have lost to anti-trans discrimination and violence. And so, yeah, it's a really significant moment and set of dates in the calendar for the queer communities. I work part-time for a trans organization, and we do a lot of awareness raising during this time. So, it's really lovely to be able to share some of Trans Awareness Week with you all today as well. So thanks for being here. I might jump. Yeah, we'll just do a little brief intro. I know Hannah already introduced us, but my name is Hank and my pronouns are they, them. And I'm a co-founder of They Connect, which is a startup that Polly and I started about 12 months ago. And we do inclusion and marketing strategy consulting. Pol.
Yes, so Polly Parker, my pronouns are she, her. And exactly as Hank said, we actually came together by volunteering at Out for Australia, which is a national nonprofit helping LGBTQ young people with mentoring. So it was lovely to meet through that. And then we decided to take the plunge and work together because we're truly passionate about marketing and brands. And there are gaps. We're seeing that there are brands who aren't necessarily keeping up pace, and there's a huge opportunity. So if we move on to the next slide, it really is this time for brands to connect with LGBTQ plus audiences without feeling awkward and tokenistic. This is a thread that comes through a lot where people are nervous about getting it right, or we're finding a lot of evidence that people aren't getting it right. And with such discerning audiences, it's really critical to invest in your own education and training. So I guess that's why we're on the call today.
Yeah. It's also really important for us to just kind of lay the expectations of today and say what we aren't covering. If you are new to LGBTQ plus inclusion and allyship, you might be hoping that you can kind of get up to date on some things like terminology or hear about our lived experience or, learn some skills around inclusive language and allyship. Those aren't things that we're covering today. And that is to say, if you don't feel super familiar with these things, it's okay. We're kind of moving into different content today that you don't need to understand all of the nuance and context behind all these things. However, this is something that Polly and I do. We deliver training for marketers around these basic kind of fundamental ideas and concepts. So if you're interested in learning more about this fundamental piece, please get in touch. We'd love to do some training with you and your team. But what we are covering today is still, we think, going to be incredibly valuable and a little bit of a different take, Pol.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely come from a very positive mindset, and the idea of rewarding and recognizing good, knowing that it's all progress and it's a journey, not necessarily a destination. So these are some of the brands that we're going to go through today and talk about what they've done that we consider to be excellence in LGBTQ plus inclusive marketing. We're going to call out a key lesson because I think you want to take home something that you can be like, cool, like that was the key thing that if I could apply that for my brand, for my agency and so on, what is that? And finally, because like I said, no one's perfect, I always am a curious little button and I have questions. I think it's through us exploring and asking questions and showing that curiosity that we learn a bit more. Now, to move on, we want to set the scene a little bit about why this is more important than ever, because we're kind of entering this area of a bit of chaos for marketers. We're seeing so much growth and change in the world. So at the moment, what we know is that 10% of Australians identify as LGBTQ+, right? That's 1 in 10. But Gen Z, who are the fastest growing consumer market, 1 in 3 identify as LGBTQIA+. So if you're thinking about future-proofing your brand, market strategies, all of that kind of thing, this growing consumer audience who is incredibly discerning, it's really key to play into this space. Now, I really love this study because we all love numbers, that the rainbow dollar in Australia in 2019 was estimated to be 95 billion.
I really wish we
Huge.
could get a more recent number on this because, I guess like to say it's more than 100 billion is a much sexier number than the 95. And I'm sure it has grown, but this is the most recent we can find.
Yeah. And then on top of that as well, what we're seeing in consumer trends is this idea that Australians are willing to pay more for products and services that frequently and authentically represent LGBTQ plus people. We know that people want to buy from brands that reflect their values. So going on as well, I really love this study. It came out of the UK, but it's relevant here as well, that 82% of people believe that the representation of LGBTQIA plus people is in advertising specifically is tokenistic. That's such a huge figure to say, I'm not feeling represented in this advertising material. And then I love this Nielsen ad tracking stat that 68% of marketers don't engage with LGBTQ audiences and communities outside of Pride season. So we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about tokenism. If you're only talking to these audiences once a year, you're really missing out on that opportunity. And then we did a little bit of a study because we love marketers. And when we were kind of putting together all of this, we found that 3 in 4 marketers in Australia do want to work with LGBTQ plus inclusive marketing strategists, and just to get that extra help to empower them. So the goal here is
Yeah.
that we're creating a world where everyone feels like they belong. Hank?
Oh no, you go. You've got this
Cool.
part.
Okay, cool. All right,
No,
so I'm
you.
super excited to talk you through the first case study then. So it's the International Olympic Committee. Now, the reason that I chose this is because I thought it's such a brilliant global brand, like global recognition, legacy brand, historical, so many different cultures feeding into it, highly structured organization. And if they can start making changes and demonstrating some excellence in this field, I really think we can learn from that. So
Mm.
the IOC is such a powerful example of like a global institution setting this new inclusion standard. And for the 2024 Paris Olympics, they introduced new portrayal guidelines specifically to ensure that all athletes, including transgender and non-binary athletes, are respected and accurately represented in media coverage. So this initiative is part of the IOC's broader gender equality and inclusion strategy, which has been around for years and looks at how gender is played out in sports. It's a reflection of the IOC's commitment to safeguarding dignity, health, and safety of LGBTQ plus athletes. Now, I find this really interesting because it's how they developed it that I think tells us a lot of lessons as well. They worked extensively in the years up to the Games with LGBTQ plus athletes and advocates. So just to make sure that they were consulting and finding out how these portrayal guidelines could be put into action. Now, I'm sure many of you watched the 2024 Games, and there are a couple of different ways that you would have seen these played out. The first, and very simply, was gender neutral language. So broadcasters and commentators were expected to refer to all competitors as athletes rather than sportsmen and sportswomen, right? Such a simple shift, but it really avoids reinforcing gender binaries, and it helps normalize inclusive language on that global stage. The next kind of key area was around this respectful representation. So the guidelines outline that the commentators must avoid making assumptions about an athlete's identity. So it's about, rather than guessing pronouns or using gender descriptions, they could use the IOC guidelines for respectful and gender neutral terms. The third point that they did, and this is where you would have seen it, and I really love this one, was the idea of teaching the broadcasters and commentators inclusive storytelling. So the portrayal guidelines encourage people and networks to tell the stories that celebrates the athletes' achievements without focusing on their gender or identities. So rather than for a transgender or non-binary athlete being like, oh, it's the first, or this is exceptional, it was meant to place the merit on their sporting achievement and skills rather than their identity. And finally, going through media training. So all registered broadcasters and journalists for the IOC were expected to undergo this training. And that's kind of huge. Like if you think about from all the different countries, all the different broadcast networks, to have them undergo this set of training before they start the games, I think that really demonstrates a commitment to it. So the key lesson, I said I was going to give you a key lesson from each of these. The idea is that true inclusivity requires setting standards, providing resources, embedding respect into every aspect of communication and storytelling. I think for us, we know that then when brands and institutions invest in thoughtful, consistent inclusivity, they can create a space where everyone can feel valued for their contributions. And this is what fosters genuine equity and respect for all audiences. Now, I also said to you that I still have questions, and this is just natural, I think, of all of us. But what I would like to know now is how are they monitoring, or how do they monitor media adherence to these guidelines during the games? Another question I'd ask is really about, did they gather feedback from LGBTQ plus athletes, audience, advocates about how they felt represented during the games? I think that's really important. How are you tracking if there need to be changes, what the feedback was? And then finally, I actually learned, I didn't know this before, but I didn't know that the Paralympics is not associated with the International Olympic Committee, and it's actually a completely different organization. And my whole point here is that we don't need to start from scratch. If the IOC has gone through all of this effort of learning and creating these guidelines, are they sharing it with other organizations and sporting organizations to be able to help them achieve this goal? I just think we can all help each other out by giving a bit more information and sharing what we've learned.
Mm,
Hank,
mm.
do you want to take over for the next
Yeah.
one?
I'll do the next one. Thanks, Paul. So our second brand that we wanted to take a look at is Vans, which I think 14-year-old Hank would have been super stoked about. I think that was the last time I bought a pair of Vans shoes. And there's a few things that I really like about what Vans have been doing recently. One of the key things for me is that they kind of have been building a bit of a legacy around their Pride collection. So each Pride month in June for the last few years, they've been dropping a collection of products that are designed by and with LGBTQ plus designers and the ambassadors that are representing Vans and athletes as well. And when they drop these collections, they also then announce a certain amount of money that they have donated to certain queer initiatives and organizations. So for example, through their Checkerboard Fund, they've supported the Where Love is Illegal project, which is all about telling stories from queer perspectives in parts of the world where, you know, their existence is either criminalized or not legalized, which is a really important piece of storytelling that the world needs. And similarly, they've partnered with community organizations and foundations like the Tegan and Sarah Foundation, which supports the lives of LGBTQ plus women and girls. So from a starting point, they're already kind of forking out a bit of funding and resourcing for these queer initiatives. But then I kind of like going a bit deeper into what these collections actually look like. So here's a couple of photos from, I think, the 2023 collection. And the thing that you might notice is there's not a whole lot of rainbows on the clothes. And I think this actually shows a lot of maturity around the development and the collaboration of these products, to say, you know, putting a big old rainbow or having a rainbow pattern on your clothing is a really easy way of, you know, visibly showing this is a Pride collection. But there's something about the subtlety of this, and, you know, I'm not sure whether this was kind of briefed from the from the brand down, or whether the designers themselves came up with this concept and then kind of took the concept back to the client. But yeah, I just love that we're looking at a Pride collection and we might not even know it. If we kind of go even a bit deeper into what that collection looks like in the customer experience on their in the e-commerce experience that they have, you know, again, here is a puffer jacket that was, you know, has no visible rainbows at all and is something that anyone could be wearing, but is still a part of their Pride collection from 2024. On this page, there's no gendered sizing. All the sizing is gender neutral, but they do know their audience. They know that we generally are purchasing clothes within a binary gendered setting, and we know our sizing based on a gendered category. So they still, within the product description, they kind of give a little bit more information, you know, the unisex sizing. But if you typically wear men's clothes, pick a normal size. And if you normally wear women's styles, go down one size. So they're kind of, you know, they're meeting people where they're at. They're saying, we know that you're used to purchasing based on gendered sizing. So we'll give you the information you need. But at the top level, they're not selling this as a gendered item. It's a non-gendered item, which I think like really shows the amount of work that they've done as a brand, that they know who they're really speaking to and who they're working with to develop these products. So I would summarize the kind of the key takeaway that when we're talking about doing an authentic Pride campaign, it's so crucial to collaborate with LGBTQ plus talent and suppliers, from the design of the product itself right through to developing the customer experience and the marketing at each step of the way. So that that's, I guess, like the key takeaway here is working with the people that you are trying to create products and sell products to. In terms of questions for the marketing team, sorry, I'm just need to pull up my I'm on a different page over here. Okay. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this before, but that kind of notion of where did the idea of having no rainbows visible on these items come from? And I'm just curious whether that was a Vans idea that they're like, we want this to be subtle. Can you please create products that meet this brief? Or if they just kind of let the designers and the athletes go, you know, whatever you want to do, and their response was, we would rather not have rainbows. I know for myself, like I've participated in focus groups for Australian clothing brands where I have explicitly said, can you give me this but without a rainbow on it? So I do see the appeal in more subtlety in a Pride product. I just would love to know, where did that come from? I also am really curious about what consultation Vans undertook when undergoing that process of de-gendering the sizing options on their website. And then similarly, do they have plans to extend the non-gendered sizing across more products on their website beyond just their Pride collection? So yeah, I think like there's a lot of, I would just love to be in a room with Vans right now to ask these questions, but there's a lot of things to love about what they have done over the last few years. Okay,
Yeah,
over
I
to
think
you,
that's really
Paul.
good. Thank you, Hank. I really love that as well. They've done it for so long, and they also do it across a number of different initiatives. So they also have disability, gender, education, and I think it just says a lot about the Vans brand and their DNA. Now, the reason as well we've gone with international brands, I should have called this out at the top, when we did IOC and also with Vans, was because we know that a few people on this call are probably representing a few Australian brands who we'd like to talk about. And we thought that might hit a bit too close to home if we're sitting here saying, here's a brand doing excellence. So we've tried to keep them at this international level. But I am now going to take you through a local case study, which is actually an agency. So Think HQ is a communications and advertising agency headquartered in Victoria. I should caveat as well that we know a few people who work at Think HQ, and I think a few might be on the call today.
Yeah.
So I
yeah,
really
hello,
hope I'm going
hello.
to do them justice in talking about this. But what I really love about Think HQ is they've made LGBTQ plus advocacy central to their identity as an agency. So earlier this year, they introduced the Queer Advocacy Committee, and it was established to amplify LGBTQ plus voices. This idea that ensuring all the campaigns that they have meaningfully represent LGBTQ plus communities and uphold inclusive storytelling. Something to know about Think HQ as well, and I found this really interesting when we were chatting to our friend there, is that 36% of the team at Think HQ are LGBTQ plus, which is double the industry average. So you can see how important this is for them internally and to represent their staff and their team, as well as what they want to achieve in terms of being this incredible agency that's leading the charge in this. So the Queer Advocacy Committee was created to solidify a vision that they had for this more inclusive workplace and culture. Now, they have specifically called out in this article that you can see here, and you can look it up on their site, but the intention is that the Think Proud team, which is part of the Queer Advocacy Committee, they focus on improvement across three key pillars of the business. So one is education, one is community, and one is policies. And I just think that's so comprehensive. Education, community, policies. If you're reflecting internally on how you're educating yourself, how you're working with community, and the policies that you have and how they can uphold these values, I think that's critical. There's also
Yeah, can I jump in, Paul?
Of course, please.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just also wanted to add something that Polly and I discovered when we did our initial kind of market research at the start of the year. And we quoted one of our stats earlier in this presentation, but we also discovered one of the biggest challenges for agencies and marketers at the moment is that they are heavily reliant on what we are deeming the token queer in the room to provide this type of advice or consultation on a Pride campaign, and that we're putting the onus on a single person to somehow represent all these diverse experiences and views and identities. And if you've just got one person in the room, then tick that box. We've got some, representation. And so I love that when we speak with the folks at Think HQ, it's not about the token queer in the room. It is, they have got this, like they've got the structure behind it, and they're empowering their team. They're allocating time within their work week to be able to do the work of the queer advocacy committee. And so we just think like this is such a gold standard of how this should be done to counteract the impact of the token queer in the room.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Thank you. I really love it. It leads to this point that they have a quote on their website. So it says, as we continue to scope out opportunities to highlight LGBTQIA+ voices, we acknowledge the need for more to support our endeavors, more time, more space, and most importantly, more learning embedded into our daily practices. And so that's what I think, like, I know we're all stretched when we have timelines, deadlines, budgets, all sorts of things, but this idea of expansive thinking and more, and what more can we be doing, is just so healthy and just leads to these opportunities. For Think HQ, what I really love is that this and the Queer Advocacy Committee, it's empowered them to be in a really strong position to authentically deliver campaigns. One of them specifically is the Unsaid Says a Lot, which was developed in partnership with the Department of Fairness, Families and Housing in Victoria. So this campaign was designed to raise awareness around discrimination and challenges faced by LGBTQ+ individuals, particularly in healthcare and social services. So the idea is that their agency, they use storytelling to challenge stereotypes and kind of spotlight the issues that people might be going through. What I really love about this as well, and what we can learn, we all love in this world a little bit of recognition. And recently at the Golden Target Awards, which is from the Communications and Public Relations Australia, Think HQ was recognised as Large Agency of the Year. And then this campaign specifically won bronze in terms of a government-sponsored campaign. And I think this just demonstrates that building LGBTQ advocacy into year-round practices, into the DNA of your organisation, it can really help you achieve this gold standard. So the key lesson: an internal culture of authentic inclusion is crucial to deliver inclusive marketing messages. Now, I only really have one question for Think HQ because, like I said, we're fortunate to kind of get to chat to them a bit. But my question is, how has having the Queer Advocacy Committee influenced their internal culture over time, but also client relationships, whether existing or new? I just think it'd be really interesting to track employee sentiment, retention, recruitment, but then also what it means for your clients as well. And like I said, there might be people on the call, but I think it's a thought starter that we can work on and kind of move from there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Paul and I often talk about like how having an inclusive marketing strategy or this kind of, the structure of having a, internal committee is a value add to the clients that you're working with. And so we'd love to, are there metrics, and can we kind of get into the numbers of how this is actually impacting their success on, certain tenders, for example. So yeah, I think we're very curious about how it's all working out for them, and we'll continue chatting with them for sure. Okay, how are we doing? We're doing well for time. This is good. Final case study. Lyft, the US ride-sharing company. I want you to cast your mind back, not too far, a couple of months, when we were all collectively feeling very mindful, very demure. So Jules LeBron, I'm really hoping we're all up to speed on this viral TikTok sensation. She's a trans woman. She lives in Chicago, and she just absolutely blew up across TikTok and Instagram with her mindful and demure video content, and just the world fell in love with Jules LeBron, and not just the world, brands. Holy moly. I mean, I'd love to just see a show of hands if anyone on the call has somehow integrated very mindful, very demure into any of your campaigns or marketing exercises in the last few months, because I swear to God, every email campaign I got for a month the headline was mindful and demure. But what we know is that Lyft collaborated with Jules LeBron for some content, for some sponsored content around a campaign they were doing. And what I love most about the way in which Lyft and Jules LeBron collaborated was that it really what's the term I'm looking for? Like, I mean, it was authentic. I'm sorry, that's just like the vibe of what we're talking about today. But it really struck a chord because it aligns with an ongoing legacy that Lyft has, that they're committed to championing LGBTQ plus communities and specifically gender diverse and trans people. So this wasn't a hollow collaboration. They were able to kind of jump on board this trend and actually work directly with Jules LeBron, compensate her for her work in a way that didn't clash with the long-term brand that they've been building as an inclusive ride-sharing app. And so, for example, oh no, I'm jumping ahead. Let's talk about we found an interview that the Lyft social media manager did with Campaign US, advertising trade media publication, and they said that their Instagram reel that featured Jules LeBron was their third highest performing piece of organic content that they'd ever produced. And so, you know, that in and of itself, that we're getting like high performing social content. But I love this quote. For us, working with creators like Jules isn't just about promoting Lyft. It's about how Lyft can help use our platform to lift people up who embody our brand and our values. Now, we love a good bit of PR and some spin. This is great spin. I love it. But actually, it's true. And that's the heart of it, is that they get to say this and they've got a lot of work to stand on to make it true. And it hits home really, really well. So for example, even just in the functionality of their app, they've released a feature that allows women and non-binary riders to select or request the gender of the driver that picks them up. They understand the safety concerns of women and gender diverse people when interacting with their app, and they found a great solution for it. Similarly, and this is a theme that we've seen across some of the other case studies, is that they're working directly with LGBTQIA plus organizations. They are, they're platforming those organizations, they're donating to those organizations, and, you know, in a couple of instances, they've actually offered free rides to community members that are attending these organizations' events. And so, you know, we can call out the Human Rights Campaign, but also they've worked directly with the Transgender Justice Initiative in the US. So it's not just like, oh, we love these rainbow organizations. Like, they're directly supporting some of our most marginalized and discriminated communities, and putting their money where their mouth is. All of this means that they get to leverage the current queer-led cultural trends in a way that feels authentic, and that they have the, what do we call it, Paul? Like the community capital. They've built up the community capital to the point where they can then spend it and go, you know what, we are actually going to, you know, use a trans influencer to be the face of a campaign that we're doing. And it lands really well. So year-round support of queer communities enables brands to leverage the current queer-led cultural trends. And I think like it's important to call out, of course, there's going to be cultural trends that we want to all leverage. And, you know, through TikTok, there'll be trends we want to leverage that aren't queer-led, and they'll still be fun and fanciful. But we know that often it is queer people at the forefront of culture, and they are often the ones leading trends. And so we know that this Jules LeBron, as much as she is the biggest sensation to hit the internet waves in years, there will be another Jules LeBron, and which brands are going to be positioned ready to authentically leverage that opportunity, rather than it being an exploitative or extractive or hollow jumping on the bandwagon.
To jump in, Hank, like I went down the rabbit hole with this so much, and someone was like, the second Mood Den was called Very Demure, Very Mindful. I knew it was dead. And I think it just attests to like how I keep saying that our audience is so discerning, but especially if we talk about Gen Z, they can cut through, oh, they're terrifying. They can absolutely cut through, and they can see through all of this. And like, I also remember there was someone posted around this time that they were like, the second Pottery Barn put Very Demure, Very Mindful in an email signature subject line to me. I was like, that's it, never engaging with it again. But when we talk about brands getting cancelled or being called out for being tokenistic, it is when you don't have that community capital over years and then you just wedge something in. And you just say, oh, cool, like we can just hop onto this because that's what everyone's talking about. I just think that we're getting, audiences are just receiving so many messages, they see through it and they just don't want to participate, and it can be potentially detrimental. So what are you doing to kind of future-proof your brand to be able to get onto these zeitgeisty kind of opportunities and leverage them in your marketing?
So questions that I would ask the Lyft marketing team would be, I mean, it feels like a no-brainer that they worked with Jules LeBron, but how else are they identifying and selecting both the talent and influencers that they want to work with, but also which organizations they choose to work with? So we mentioned that they've done work with the Transgender Justice Initiative and the Human Rights Campaign as just a couple of nonprofits that they support. What's the selection criteria for choosing which nonprofit? And in particular, are you going with just the trendy nonprofit that's kind of got a big brand and fun rainbows in their logo? Or are you working with an organization that actually aligns really well with the impact that you want your brand to be able to have in community? So I'd love to be in those conversations about why did we choose these ones? I want to hear more. I want to understand like what feedback mechanisms that they have to gauge the impact of the partnership with Jules LeBron. And particularly, we know that trans influencers are subject to a whole load of transphobia and awful comment sections. And I have experienced it myself. Not that I'm an influencer, but I have been on the wrong side of a TikTok viral video, and it's really, really awful. So what is Lyft doing to ensure that like they're moderating those comments and that engagement to ensure that Jules isn't the one doing the mental labor of having to manage the feelings of transphobia and the direct like harmful messages. So that's conversations that I'm not sure what happened there, and I'd love to know.
Hank, I just had a thought.
Mm.
I would really like to know as well how they built up their business resiliency internally, that they decided that this was going to be a key part of their strategy. Because like who from the very top was like, you know what, these are our values. This is what we're going to stick with. We understand that some people might be like, oh, I'm never using a lift. It's, too woke. Like what did they do internally to decide that and build that into their brand strategy, identity, and how they protecting, like you said, their social media team, how are they giving their team the freedom to explore this option and just, yeah, I just think that's really interesting from a business perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess it helps when you're a Silicon Valley startup. Like that's just already the culture in those spaces that you want to be doing that well. But I mean, for them to show up consistently for as long as they have and to put it at the forefront of their brand is really commendable, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess the quick fire tips from us, and this is when we go through them, screenshot it, have a think. One of the ones that's come through a lot is really about community consultation. So this is about, I mean, it leans on what we were talking about, the token queer in the room. It's hard to rely on them. That's a lot of pressure, but it also doesn't necessarily reflect the diversity of community. So community consultation is a really important way that you can test and learn. Hank?
Oh yeah, I reckon we need to blitz through this just so we've got enough time for questions as well. But yeah, so again, themes that kind of come up out of today's case studies: collaborating with LGBTQ plus talent and creatives. I actually didn't even get to mention with Vans, but like they did some, they had ambassadors part of their campaign that did like they created their own content that is really, really cool and authentic stuff. And I would love to like sit and watch all the videos that are on Instagram from those ambassadors. But yeah, like that was totally queer-led content that they just kind of, amplify.
Yeah, behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, and behind the scenes, of course. We want to be thinking deep and long term. This is so much more about building out inclusive brand strategy rather than just doing, again, just jumping on a viral trend for the sake of it. This needs to be done in a considered and strategic way. I hope you're happy, Paul. I'm just
run it.
driving through. Yeah. You know, Think HQ again, really just gold standard in creating safe and inclusive workplaces. We love the work that ACA is doing in equipping and educating the industry on how to do this. And that is really fundamental for you then having the credibility to then go and create campaigns that are promoting inclusion and safety. And finally, we don't want brands to be gatekeeping. You know, if you figure something out like IOC, how to do portrayal guidelines in a really effective way, share that with the world and share the impact that you're able to have. If you can measure it, you know, there is not enough data that Polly and I get to rely on in these kinds of webinars. There's not enough data for us to be able to draw on, and we wish there was more. And it's about the collective you know, growth and education of the market rather than just being competitors for the sake of it. So
exactly, yeah.
Okay, where to start?
Where to begin?
You happy if I just like run through?
Go for it, Hank.
I'm not going to dwell on Create Space too much
Yeah, I
because
think
Hannah
did a
gave it a
great
really
job.
good plug, but please, there is so much stuff on their website right now that you can go and read and action straight away. We love all of the things that they've outlined. There's a whole kind of action plan that you just go step by step and you follow the steps. And it's just like a great way for agencies to get a foot in the door of being an inclusive and
just a bit of traction
yeah,
to know where to start.
Otherwise, work with us. We'd love to work with you. We do a lot of capability training. We do this fundamentals for marketers training. We also have kind of our signature Inclusify framework where we turn campaigns. We analyze campaigns and develop campaigns using this 3-step framework that we have around awareness, amplification, and action. And then we also have a very exciting tool called the Pride Tolerance Compass, and we can help you figure out what is your brand's or potentially your client's pride tolerance score, and then how does that inform the types of initiatives and campaigns and messaging that you develop with your client, with the brand. We do a whole bunch of strategy and consulting. Again, we think community consultation is huge. We are not in and of ourselves representative of the entire community, but we have the marketing nous with the lived experience, and we bring people on the journey to be able to deliver really tactical, hands-on, strategy and consultation. And Queer Peers Network, how are we doing? I'm so sorry, everyone. We're just rushing through because we do want to get to some questions. So They Connect also runs a program called the Queer Peers Network, where we connect brands and agencies with LGBTQ plus talent and suppliers. So on your next campaign, if you need a copywriter, if you need a graphic designer, if you need a photographer, if you need some on-screen talent and you want some lived experience and diversity and representation in the full development of that campaign, we can hook you up. So yeah, we'd love to make some introductions if that is something that you're interested in. And finally, just our final plug is if you're in Sydney tomorrow night at 6 p.m, we're doing a launch showcase for They Connect. We're really stoked to be supported by Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. We've got a wonderful relationship with the folks at Mardi Gras. And we're just throwing a bit of a party. You'll hear a little bit more from Paul and I more about like our vision of the future of inclusion and marketing. So not so much these case studies, but rather like, we're just going to set the stage of like, what are we manifesting for the next 5 to 10 years in our sector? And the invitation is open to all, but please, if you are interested, we'd love you to register. So there's a QR code if you can scan. Otherwise, we're going to shoot out an email straight after this webinar with that invitation. So yeah, we'd really, really love to have you if you're in Sydney and around at 6 p.m. But with that, I reckon
let's do some questions because I love the questions that have come through. They're so great. Thank you. Hannah, do we just rock and roll?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I can see there's a bunch there, and I think maybe it'd be great for you to sort of jump on the one that you feel immediately like, I would like to answer this one.
I love the one. Okay, so Hank, I'm going to read it to you because I have an idea, but I think also you're very eloquent in explaining this. So why do you sometimes have IA on the LGBTQ plus in your deck and sometimes you do not? You also don't say the IA when you speak about it. Is there a reason? Do you want to start with the history of that briefly?
Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. This is where it's like, do our fundamentals training.
Yeah.
Okay. Really, really briefly. The I in that acronym represents intersex and people with variations of sex characteristics. And people in the intersex community have specifically requested that they are, when it's appropriate, that they are given the opportunity to speak for themselves about their experiences, rather than people who are not intersex and do not have variations of sex characteristics, trying to educate without that lived experience. So there's, from our perspective, we made a really conscious decision that when it comes to the way in which we want to market ourselves and who we can help you reach, we have lived experience as LGBTQ plus people, but both of us. But intersex is not something that either of us have lived experience in. So it's a brand decision for us to say, hey, if you want to learn more about this, we can absolutely bring people in who have that lived experience. And so yes, it's a bit fluid. There's no reason why you can't use the I in the acronym when referring to our beautiful communities. But for us, especially when it's like we're promoting our services do not include lived experience perspective on the intersex experience. So that's
Or
kind of,
asexual.
yeah, it's not super consistent for us, but that's kind of where we try to
And
delineate.
it's once you kind of acknowledge that you understand the difference between LGBTQ plus and then adding the IA, it's really interesting seeing brands who have the IA and others who don't. So when we talk about these case studies, specifically from like the IOC portrayal guidelines, they had the IA. So it's just it's not necessarily a perfect system, but yeah, that's what we've taken
Yeah.
on when we've acknowledged and talked from our lived
And
experience.
I'll just really quickly add,
Mm.
if you are interested in more about that specific decision, the best place you can start is by Googling the Darlington Statement.
Yeah.
There's so much that is written by intersex people, and that will give you a bit more context as well. So the Darlington Statement.
Hank, can I ask you this question?
Please.
What kind of effect do you feel tokenism in marketing has on the LGBTQIA plus community? It is a lesser evil or is it a double-edged sword?
It's really hard to answer that broadly. Like, it's really contextual for me, because in some instances I would still rather have the tokenistic visibility than have nothing at all. But it's so contextual. So is it a lesser evil or a double-edged sword? It's so hard, because sometimes I would say it's actually you're doing more damage if there's no consultation and you poorly represent queer communities, and maybe you are perpetuating harmful stereotypes. I'd say that is more harmful than just not doing anything at all.
I agree. And that's what I was going to say about the channel and the audience, because if you're thinking about your brand and, these days we talk so much about segmentation and we talk about segmentation and stereotyping, but depending on where that message is landing, if it's not with like a queer audience, is it then perpetuating harmful stereotypes to an audience who is already believing that?
Yeah.
So that's where it can be
Definitely.
really damaging. But also, I think the way around that is also the nothing about us without us and getting that community consultation.
Definitely. Hey,
Yeah.
I just want to mention the person who asked that question about the IA. I think they've come back in and they said I was asking that as an intersex person. So that's like, I hope that landed really well for you. And you've said thank you. So yeah, hit us up. We'd love to chat, actually.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
have a question
cool.
that you were vibing with, Hank?
I have not even had a chance to
Okay,
look
true.
at
All
those.
right. How about I ask you this, but I think we touched on it. My question is, this is from Sally. Is there a network for LGBTQIA plus talent to get involved in providing consultation participation in focus groups to give feedback to brands? This is on our long-term strategy
This
to
is our
work
dream.
with, yeah,
Yeah.
to especially
This is
work
what
with
we're
a
manifesting.
research agency who we can, through queer peers and the concept of that, of being able to set up a channel and a network. But market research obviously is so specific in its methodology and making sure that it is diverse and representative and appropriate for brands. But one of our big issues is, like we keep talking about, this data issue and just having it available, readily available. This is why obviously when the census was looking at dropping the questions, it was really enraging to us as well, because we love data. So yeah, this is where it's a big dream of ours. We don't believe, or we haven't been able to find anyone that currently has it set up in a more formalized way, though I do know that a lot of market research agencies are able to do incredible things with their audience profiling as well.
Yeah, I think we also have work, and this is like why we've started our company. Like we have work to do improving the commercial benefit of these types of focus groups. And right now, like we struggle with our clients when they don't have a line item in their budget for the work that we do. So where are they supposed to find the funds? And, you know, where the economy and the market is at the moment, we like, it's just, there's a question about money that we need to get better answers to, and the data will help us do that. And also just like time and proving the concept better. So yes, eventually this is the dream, and it would, you know, we would want it to be a point where it's like, it's just a default part of the budget allocation for a campaign is that we would do this research, we would have these focus groups, and therefore the need for those, you know, networks to exist is natural.
Hey, I'm going to ask you another one. I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, great.
For brands just beginning their journey towards LGBTQ plus inclusivity, what are the first practical steps that they should take? Hire us.
They're just
Sorry.
beginning. Is that what the question
Yeah,
was?
just beginning.
I would say you want to hire us to do some LGBTQ plus fundamentals training for marketers, by marketers. It's a really palatable, accessible training that we deliver. And practical as a first step. Bring your team into a room and get on the same page about inclusion. But otherwise, again, you know, just to call back to the Create Space project that ACA have been working. You know, there's really great resources on that on their website that gives you step by step how you can, you know, an action plan for this sort of stuff. So yeah, there's lots of different kind of avenues and ways to approach this.
And to complement Think HQ again, which I know I've done a lot, but education, community, and policies, we talk a lot about that tokenism comes from if you do a pride campaign, but then it turns out that you have horrific internal employee policies. It just doesn't align. That's like you're really opening yourself up for a liability there and reputational damage. So internal policies as well. And I think that's where Create Space comes into, can really help you take those first steps. And doing it authentically, which has been our
it's
buzzword for today.
interesting. A lot of people got in touch with us around Create Space to say, what about representation and diversity in the ads that we create or the work that we create? And I was like, yeah, it's probably not the primary focus of the Create Space program, but the two naturally and necessarily intersect and interact. And so it's kind of like, yeah, start with getting your own house in order.
A little bit, yeah.
Or that you have sort of done some reflection, you've worked out why you even care about it. And if you've got a why and a mindset and a little bit of executive sponsorship, then doing the education piece and the policy piece internally first will probably just set the ideal environment to then start to work out, all right, you know, where do we want to invest further? Where do we want to show up in the minds of our consumers and customers? So yeah, with everything, it's probably less of a tactical campaign. It's more of a business strategy. It's the part of the sort of ongoing day-to-day life of running a business is you're thinking about these principles, which is why it is kind of, you have to be in for the long haul, not the quick fix.
Yeah.
So again, we're here, and They Connect are a fantastic resource. I love the Queer Peer Network as well. That's an excellent resource for people to tap into. You really get our industry. And so I would invite everybody to, connect with Hank and Polly on LinkedIn. And if you are in Sydney tomorrow night, there will be an email in your inbox today with more details. But yeah, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. That was really good, really easy to listen to. And I think just provided some excellent inspiration for us to kind of point to as how to do this well. And the fact that all of us are still learning and have questions. We have questions, which is great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you everyone for having us as well.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. This has been great.
All right. Everybody has a great week and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.